Thaayu, my people. This is your girl, Kiari Africa again. Nduta wa Kiarie, wa ithiagani wa Kiarie. Kuma barea thiro, Munjirū wanyu. And I'm here in a very interesting place, a very interesting house. I've come to visit one of my old friends from Norway. She comes from a place called Røros. Røros, you can check it out on the UNESCO heritage. It's one of the oldest places to exist in Norway. And guess what, people? This house that I'm in today is dated back in 1885. It's written here, 1885. And I'm being told that this house was not here initially. So it was moved from a place down here called Singsas and then brought to this place in 1885. Like back then, people. And let me tell you guys, this place is like visiting a museum. And it's interesting. See, I found something written 1836. And this, I understand that existed when this house was renovated. They found most of these things like hidden on the walls. This is how people used to hide things a long time and used to preserve things. And let me tell you guys, it's very interesting. For example, here, I have the old-fashioned butter maker. Can you imagine, guys? Like, of course, these days we use blenders and food processors and all these things. But look at this, guys. Like, it is so interesting how they used to do it. Of course, it needs some grease and all this. They will have this to separate the, the milk, so where you get the buttercream and the butter. And then we have this separator. So they used to use this first. We have this made from aluminium. And then they will have it here. And then they will make the butter there, and they'll be left with buttercream and the butter. And guess what, guys? Look at this. This is dated 1730. Were you born then? Were your ancestors born? I don't think so. Maybe ancestors, like way before. You can imagine 1730, they had this, which was used to make yarn. For those of you who know so much about most of the African fabrics and all that, you've seen this like in West Africa when they're making the hand-woven fabrics. But of course, this one goes way back. Can you imagine, people? It's still preserved. And guess what? Look at this. An old machine. Sewing machine. It looks more like your normal singer. But look at this, guys. Like everything. Are you seeing the wood? Are you seeing the wood here? Look at this. When we are embracing so much of China, and we are forgetting our history and where we come from, we are forgetting that this is where the gold is. And the gold is in preserving the things that existed during our ancestors' time. There's something about Norwegians I'm learning, that they preserve even their houses. And this part of Norway, you can Google it. It's called Røros. It's full of their heritage. Like anything, like you've seen this house I'm standing in, it's dated 1885. Can you imagine how many years ago? 1885, like long before. And the things that were in this house, they're still preserved. And there's the generation now living here where my friend Karoline is living with her boyfriend. And they have renovated this house to suit them. And inside here, it's so beautiful. Like when we join me in this room, there's a game here. It's used to be played back in the days. And guys, people, like, you have to start now preserving stuff. We have to. I decided to make this video so we can see the importance of keeping the things that our grandmothers live, our grandfathers live, our grandparents live. Look at this. This was a trunk used back in the day. You can use this to store your, your curtains, your like your throw sets, like when you're seated on the sitting room, on the couch. You can use that. And Caroline tells me that this clock here, the grandfather made this clock. And it's still there. It's an antique clock. What does your house have? Does it have everything China? Everything just was made the other day? So look at the fireplace, people. Look at this. Look at the fireplace. And I know this. It's used to like put the fire, like the fire burning. For example, in Kikuyu, in Koyo tribe, they told motoriro. So, look at this innovation. Can someone try to make something like this back home? Look, you can come here. let me tell you, people, we need to learn so much from this part of Norway. And look at this, guys. Did you know where they store their stuff? Look at the wood. Look at everything. Look at that antiqueness. Look at that. There's so much gold in it. So much gold in it. So I hope you're learning, people. I hope you're learning. And guess what? It's wood, wood, wood everywhere. I mean, it's full of just things that were there way before. Are you saving something from it? Look at this. It even has rust because it goes way back. Everything, even from the specs that they used to wear, everything you used to have, they have saved all these things. And there's a very antique bag here. I don't know how old is this bag, Karoline?
Very old.
Very old. Like it's, I can see it's made from an animal, from a certain animal. And it's still there, still preserved. And people, can you tell me in your comment, in the comments, what you've learned about this? Look at this antique seat. Look at it. Yes. So we need to start saving more of the things that existed before us. It's the only way we can be able to tell our children about our history, and we can only do this by showing them what existed before. Like, I'm very impressed by this. They're even saving the old meat grinder to, like, with the anyama, you see, they even save it. And I know you can get this. I mean, Norwegians are very particular when it comes to handmade stuff. Trori nemote o tahia mai no ruga na o tahia mai ma kuruga mai ma konyua, like it's very antique stuff here, like what they used to have for milk and all this. And guess what, people, this was a trumpet, an old-time trumpet. For us in African countries, I think we used to use more of the horn. So they used to have this, and traditions travel way back. So anytime someone wanted to, like, pass a message, they would go out and just blow this. Of course, I can't blow. Karoline is laughing at me. I tried it and I failed miserably. So they also have this, and it's still preserved. And they used to use this even during war times. And for those who've been in Norway and have tried, like, waffle, we have an old waffle maker which was used over the fire. See? The antiqueness, even the weight can tell you that this thing, I mean, people, go way back, even books. Look at that, people. Preservation. It's like the way I've been talking about preserving our cultures, and culture comes in the way people used to live. Even long time, if there was a certain baking powder that was used, keep it. You remember when we had this, like when we were growing up in the 80s, there are like things we used to use for our hair, like hair grow. I don't know what happened to that hair food. Like an old time Gillette, still kept, still preserved, whether it's still the box or the tube. I mean, why can't we just learn about preservation of this? So if you have an old grandmother out there, if you have an old grandfather, if you have old grandparents, and they are collectors, if they have been saving all this, why don't you start preserving them? Just tell your grandparents that after your time, I would love to keep this, I would love to preserve this. And why don't you also start by collecting stuff and keeping them, so by the time you're an ancestor, your generations that will come after you, they will know, oh, my grandfather or my grandparents or my grandmother, they used to live like this, and they can have a feel. So for example, Karoline, when she's here, even though she never met her ancestors, they are way gone, she has them all here. Like, she is here with her ancestors all the time, because there's so much touch, there's so much feel. I mean, you can even learn and be told, this used to belong to your grandfather, this used to belong to your grandparents, this used to belong to your great-great-grandparents. And then you can start having a feel of them in you, like you start feeling like you're there, not just in spirit, but, you know, you're feeling them and how they used to live. And Karoline has even started a hobby of learning how to make yarn. This is how she passes her evenings. She's told me that, and I'm very excited about that. So people, why don't we just retain and try and preserve the old things that existed? It's so many things here. I could take a whole day showing you, but I'm glad you've learned something, that we need to start preserving our own history by preserving the things that existed way before. Do you know, being in this house, it made me feel like I'm in a museum. You know, you've ever been to the Nairobi museums or like to the Nairobi Serena Hotel, and you've seen the things they've preserved, like the old African jewelry, what they used to use long time and all that, and you're like, ah, okay, so why don't we start? I'm so sure in most of our grandparents' house they have these things they used to use long time ago. For example, I know when my grandmother passed, I want to keep one of her kettles that my mother, they used to use when they were growing up. She raised my mother and all her 7 siblings using that kettle. I want to preserve that. I want to keep it. I want to remember her with that. And I know most of you who come from other families, privileged families, who have been preserving this. Let's keep up with this culture. Let's keep up with this culture of preservation. And at one time, someone will, your descendant will be living in a house where they will say, once I had a grandmother, her name was Nduta Wakiarie. She lived back in the 2020 something, and this was her house, this was hers, this was her old machine. Yes, and I think with that we will have our great descendants to come. They will have stories to tell about us. What I know is that I want to be a woman who will be remembered in so many ways. A woman who never kept quiet, a woman who talked about Africa, a woman who put Africa on the map. So I want to be that woman. We can do this, people. If in Norway they are doing this, in Winterland, in this cold country, I believe every other people in this world, whether you're Native American, whether you're Native African, whether you're Native Norwegian, you have a culture that you can preserve, and you can only do this by preserving the things that existed before you. Ne thaayu mono, and thank you so much for all the subscribers and people who follow me and for the love. Ne thaayu, and I will say bye-bye, and we can continue the evening with my good friend, Karoline. Thank you so much, guys.